You know that moment when something you care deeply about is starting to slip out of your hands. You've tried. You've heard no. The evidence is piling up, and the voice in your own head is beginning to say, maybe this just isn't going to happen. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote about exactly this kind of moment. The moment when you're so close to the problem that you can no longer see beyond it. And in that moment, she pointed to something surprisingly small. Not an audience, not 10 supportive friends. One person. Someone who can still see you succeeding when fear has made it difficult for you to see it yourself. And by the end of this video, I'm going to give you 3 questions that can reveal whether the person you instinctively turn to is actually the right person for this role. Because the person who loves you most isn't always the person best able to hold your vision with you. A setback starts looking like the end. A rejection begins sounding like proof. One closed door convinces us that every door is closed. We're standing so close to the situation that fear fills the entire picture, while someone outside of it may still be able to see the road. Think of one thing you're trying to create, change, begin, or accomplish. Something that matters enough that another person's reaction could affect you. Keep that one thing in mind, because before we finish, I want you to know whether there is someone in your life who deserves access to it. Florence gives us a remarkable example in the game of life and how to play it. A businessman came to her because he desperately needed $50,000 for his business. The deadline was almost over. The bank had already refused him, and from his point of view, the situation looked finished. Florence told him to go back to the bank. Immediately, he began explaining why that couldn't possibly work. The bank closed at noon. His train wouldn't get him there until late in the morning. The deadline was that very day, and they'd already said no. Everything he could see pointed toward the same conclusion. Too late. Impossible. Finished. Florence didn't join him there. She held a different picture. She continued to see the possibility of success while he was struggling to see it for himself. He went back. According to Florence's account, he reached the bank at 11:45, asked for the loan, and received it. Then she tells us why the story matters. Florence says that in this particular situation, the man needed someone to help him hold to the vision. Her explanation is simple. We get too close to our own affairs. Doubt and fear begin taking over. Someone who isn't standing inside the same emotional pressure may still be able to see success clearly. And then Florence quotes what she calls a keen observer of life. No man can fail if some one person sees him successful. One person. That is much more interesting than simply saying, we all need encouragement. Florence isn't suggesting that somebody else's belief magically guarantees our success. She isn't telling us to ask permission, and she certainly isn't telling us to announce every dream to everyone we know. She's talking about what happens when our own vision wavers. Sometimes the person standing outside the storm can still see the road, while the person inside it sees nothing but rain. That is where another human being can become valuable, but only if you choose carefully, because you've probably experienced the opposite. You're excited about something new. Maybe it's a business idea, a creative project, a move, a career change, or something you finally decided to try. Then you tell someone. Within minutes, the doubts begin. What if it fails, or you lose money? What will people think? Are you sure this is even realistic? Suddenly, you're defending something you were perfectly willing to build 5 minutes earlier. Their fear has entered the room. They may love you and genuinely want to protect you. They may even believe they're helping. But good intentions don't automatically make someone the right person to hold your vision. And this is where people often give completely opposite advice. Some say you should never tell anyone what you're planning. Work quietly and let the results speak. Others believe telling people creates accountability. Once someone else knows what you said you were going to do, backing out becomes harder. Interestingly, research doesn't give us one universal rule either. Some studies suggest that sharing certain intentions can sometimes reduce the effort that follows, while other research finds that sharing goals can increase support and effort in the right circumstances. So the useful question isn't simply, should I tell people or stay quiet? It's, who am I telling? And what do I need from them? Because privacy can be useful. Accountability can be useful, but neither of those is quite what Florence was talking about. Her businessman wasn't procrastinating. He was wavering. He had looked at the evidence and turned it into a verdict. The bank said no. The deadline was almost over. His train was late. Therefore, it was impossible. That is the moment Florence's one-person principle becomes powerful. Not when you need somebody to force you to do the work, but when you need someone who can help you separate what happened from what fear is telling you it means. And this is where Florence's idea becomes something you can actually use. Because not everyone who loves you should have access to your vision. Before you give someone that role, there are 3 questions I would ask. The first is, can this person question my plan without making me question my capacity? That distinction matters enormously. Imagine you tell someone you want to start a business. They look at your numbers and say, these don't work yet. That may be exactly what you need to hear. You need better numbers. Maybe you need a stronger plan. Nothing about that statement says you're incapable of building a successful business. Now imagine someone responds with, you're not really a business person. Why would you think you could do this? That is completely different. One challenges the route. The other shrinks the traveler. The person who can help hold your vision doesn't have to agree with every decision you make. They may point out a flaw, urge you to slow down, suggest that you gather more information, or disagree with the direction entirely. But underneath that disagreement, they still see you as capable of thinking, learning, changing, recovering, and finding another way. They don't mistake one bad road for proof that there is no destination. So think about the people you usually turn to when something matters. Can they challenge what you're doing without making you feel incapable of doing anything? That is question 1. The second question is this. After I talk to this person, do I leave clearer or smaller? Notice I didn't say happier. The right conversation may not make you happy. Sometimes clarity hurts. Someone may point out something you didn't want to see. You might realize that your plan needs to change, that you've been avoiding something, or that you need to slow down. But afterward, you understand the situation better. You still feel like the person making the decision. You still have access to your own judgment. Feeling smaller is different. You leave embarrassed for wanting what you want. Their fears begin playing in your own voice. Suddenly, continuing feels as though it requires their permission. And this can happen even with people who love us deeply. Their instinct is protection, so possibility gets translated into danger. Instead of helping you distinguish between a real risk and a fearful prediction, everything becomes a reason to stop. The right person doesn't remove risk from your life. They help you see it clearly without allowing fear to become prophecy. There is a major difference between, this could go wrong, so let's think carefully about it, and this could go wrong, so you probably shouldn't try. One leaves room for careful thought. The other lets fear make the decision. So after you speak to someone about something important, ask yourself, am I clearer? Or have I simply become smaller? Then there is the third question. Can this person support my vision without trying to own it? Because support can quietly become control. You share one idea, and before long the other person has decided what your business should become, where you should live, how quickly you should move, what success should look like, and exactly which path you should take. At some point, you're no longer pursuing your vision, you're managing theirs. Look again at Florence and the businessman. She didn't run his business. She didn't go to the bank for him. She didn't take responsibility for the result. Florence held to possibility while he acted. He still had to get on the train. He still had to walk into the bank. He still had to ask. That part matters. The one person isn't there to live your life. They aren't there to become the authority over your decisions. Their value is in helping you see beyond fear when your own view has become clouded. Then you move. So now you have the one-person test. Can this person question my plan without questioning my possibility? Do I leave clearer rather than smaller? Can they support the vision without trying to own it? Those 3 questions tell you far more than simply asking, is this person supportive? Because someone can be very encouraging and still not be useful. They can tell you everything is wonderful, agree with every decision you make, and reassure you constantly. But if they can't help you see clearly, that isn't what Florence was describing either. The person who helps hold the vision isn't there to flatter you. They're there to help keep one setback from becoming a prophecy. You were rejected this time. That doesn't mean you'll always be rejected. This attempt failed. That doesn't mean the next one will. This path has a problem. That doesn't mean there is no other path. They help keep the evidence in perspective. That may be one of the most valuable things another person can do for us when we're afraid. Because fear loves to take something temporary and make it permanent. It takes, this didn't work, and turns it into, nothing will work. It takes, this person rejected me, and turns it into, nobody will want me. It takes, I don't know how to solve this yet, and quietly changes it into, there is no solution. That is exactly when another perspective can matter. Not because the other person knows the future, they don't, but because they aren't standing as close to the fear as you are. They may still be able to see the difference between a fact and a conclusion. And that is why choosing this person carefully matters. Think again about the goal you chose at the beginning. Now think about the people you normally turn to when you begin doubting yourself. Does anyone pass the test? Maybe someone comes to mind immediately. They may not be your closest friend. They may not be your partner. They don't need to know every detail of your life. What matters is that their presence helps you see more clearly when fear makes everything look final. And if there is someone like that, don't make the mistake of expecting them to guess what you need. Tell them. You could say, I'm too close to this right now. Help me see what fear may be making me miss. Or, I don't need you to promise me everything will work. I need help separating this setback from what I'm concluding about the future. You could even say, tell me if you see a problem with my plan. Just don't let me turn one problem into proof that the whole thing is impossible. Notice how different that is from asking, do you think I can do it? That question gives another person enormous authority. Their yes makes you feel powerful. Their no can make you collapse. That isn't what we're doing. You're not asking somebody else to decide whether you're capable. You're asking for another set of eyes while you decide what comes next. And that is a very different relationship to support. Perhaps you're listening to this thinking, I don't have that person. Then don't grab the nearest available human being simply because Florence wrote about the power of one. The wrong audience isn't better than no audience. Sometimes a dream really does need privacy, especially when the idea is new, when you know outside opinions easily get into your head, or when talking about plans has become a substitute for acting on them. A seed doesn't need an audience. It needs soil. And until someone proves they deserve access to your vision, you can help your future self hold it. Write down what you believe while you're clear. Record yourself explaining why this matters. Keep evidence of what you've already done. Leave yourself one sentence to read when a rejection makes you want to quit. Sometimes the version of you who sees clearly today needs to speak to the version of you who will doubt tomorrow. And there is another side to Florence's teaching that may be just as important. You may be the one person for somebody else. Think about someone in your life who is struggling with something deeply important to them. They may not need another warning. Chances are they already know everything that could go wrong. They've probably rehearsed most of it at 3 in the morning. They don't need you to promise an outcome you can't promise. And they don't need blind positivity. Maybe what they need is someone who refuses to let fear pretend it knows the future. Someone who can say, yes, this rejection happened. It doesn't predict the next one. Yes, this attempt failed. That doesn't mean the next one will. Yes, this door closed. That doesn't mean every other door will close. Let's look at what actually happened before we decide what it means. That isn't pretending everything is wonderful. It's refusing to turn one piece of evidence into a permanent verdict. And perhaps that is part of what Florence understood so well. When we become too close to our own affairs, you can lose the distinction between what happened and what fear says it means. Sometimes another person helps us see that distinction again. One person, not everybody. One. So if I had to reduce this entire teaching to one practice, it would be this. Choose carefully who gets access to your vision when your own vision starts to waver. You're not looking for their approval. They don't need to know your path better than you do. But there may be moments when you're standing so close to the problem that you can't see beyond it. At times like that, another steady mind may be able to hold a possibility you've temporarily dropped. So look once more at the goal you've been carrying through this video, and use the test. Who can question my plan without questioning my possibility? Who leaves me clearer rather than smaller? Who can support the vision without trying to own it? If one person comes to mind, perhaps that is the person you need to talk to. And if nobody does, don't force it. Hold the vision carefully until someone proves they deserve access to it. You don't have to announce every dream. You don't need everybody to understand what you're doing. But Florence understood that sometimes we become too close to our own affairs to see clearly. And in those moments, one person can matter. I'd love to know this in the comments. Is there one person in your life who helps you see possibility when you're starting to doubt it?